Hey everyone, it's Daniel, and this is day 18 of my 30-day video challenge. And what I want to talk about today is a little bit of a piggybacking off a concept that I talked about yesterday, that of emotional balance or emotional purification, which is kind of one of the things that tends to happen in meditation practice and people who have kind of established a regular practice and gotten going, established a foundation in concentration. What starts to happen is the meditation instructions, if you're studying a curriculum or studying with a teacher, after you get a strong foundation in concentration, the curriculum starts to change a little bit, and the focus of the meditations become more introspective, more observing how attention and how awareness operates from moment to moment. And the stronger your concentration is, the better your ability to track experience from moment to moment in fine detail. The easier the process, the second part of the process, the emotional balance, the emotional integration, the easier that gets. So it's usually why you start with concentration. And even within the structure of specific meditation session, you're going to probably at the beginning focus more on concentration. You're going to let your mind get settled, and then you'll start doing an emotional insight practice. So so let's talk a little bit more about how this actually works. I think there's a misconception that meditation is a kind of a form of escape, and people, when they're meditating, what they're doing is actually kind of lying to themselves or getting themselves into this fake kind of gooey trance-like state where you're feeling good, but you haven't actually solved any of your problems. You haven't actually done any work. This I think is a fallacy. Although, so the misconception is probably valid in some cases. There are a lot of people who use meditation as a form of escape or as a form of denial, denying the reality of the situation or the experience that you're having. And so these are real dangers, real pitfalls. But I think if you're doing it right, this can and should be avoided and isn't the real essence of the practice. The real goal is not to escape in any way from the experience that you're having or make the bad feeling go away necessarily. We're not trying to push things away. In fact, one of the primary goals of mindfulness practice is to kind of build the strength, build some core skills that can lead you up to this point where you can actually completely stay with even really negative emotional experiences. That's actually the goal. And so when we're practicing concentration, clarity, and equanimity, unified mindfulness style, we're building up these skills. We're learning how to concentrate. We're learning how to see our experience clearly moment to moment. And we're practicing equanimity. We're practicing the ability to let our experience arise however it will, without feeling driven or compulsively compelled to make a judgment, get caught up with an emotional reaction. So yes, when we're practicing equanimity, there is we are putting some space between us and our experience, but the space that we're putting between our experience and ourselves is first of all, it's necessary. It's the kind of separation that we're cultivating is actually more aligned, more authentic with the way that things are, because the way that things are, at least for human experience, I don't know what's really out there, But in terms of first-person human experience, um, the most real way, the most accurate way of portraying what's going on is that you're always having some kind of sensory experience, and then you can observe that neutrally. That's always possible. That's always available. Um, and recognizing that that's available, remembering that's available, and knowing how to access that is kind of what we're doing when we're practicing equanimity. So from that place of equanimity, we can actually start to become strong enough. We have a coping tool so that we can now actually turn towards a strong emotion. It could be like anxiety, depression, like existential dread, something horrible and terrible happening in our lives. We can actually turn towards that emotion and fully experience it. We can allow it into our space without it causing us to have a panic reaction, to want to push it away, to dissociate from it. So in a strange way, this equanimity practice, this allowing experience to happen however it happens, allows us to experience and process negative emotions in a way that we wouldn't otherwise unless we had done this kind of training or practice. So just I'm trying to like think of an example or describe this in a little more clearly, but when you're in a oh gosh, yeah, okay, if you're having anxiety, let's just use anxiety. Anxiety is like a kind of a nervous emotion. It kind of tenses up your gut. It kind of excites your nervous system, so you're experiencing central nervous system arousal. Maybe your breathing becomes more rapid. Maybe external sensory data is more intense, like we're hearing all kinds of sounds, we're paying more attention to the environment. Our thought process has sped up. And for most people, this experience of anxiety actually is rather uncomfortable as well. So there's kind of an inbuilt dislike or discomfort with this experience. We don't really like it, and that's part of the emotional reactivity. Is this that we're having the anxious feelings and we don't like it. We want it to go away. So what normally happens when anxiety comes up is people resort to their favorite or their default coping mechanism. And that coping mechanism usually involves some kind of strategy to create an artificial, a misaligned distance between ourselves and that anxious feeling. So what we might do, I mean, in an extreme case, we might take alcohol or drugs to make that anxious feeling go away or become less prominent in our experience. Of course, that kind of taking a drug or alcohol basically would fall under the category of some kind of distraction, some kind of stimulus that's going to take my mind off of that anxious feeling. What else could we do? We could seek comfort from other people. We could go out into nature. There's all kinds of coping mechanisms, and there's a spectrum of like healthy to unhealthy. But the key is for all of these on this level of coping, what we're actually doing is taking the anxiety to be more real than it actually is. So we're actually taking the anxiety as significant and real, and that the meaning contained within that anxious feeling is real, and therefore we actually need to react to it in some way. So there's always this element of I'm having this anxious feeling and I need to do something about it so that it will go away. This is the kind of mode that we get in when we're trying to escape, or if we're trying to use a coping mechanism. So what we're doing in meditation is actually kind of completely different than all of that. We're not actually trying to make the feeling go away. We're not we're not even necessarily trying to actively think of a solution to the problem, although that can be extraordinarily useful. Perhaps when we're done meditating or before we meditate, we actually need to come up with a, like a rational or a cognitive plan, a strategy to get ourselves out of this mess, to reduce the potential for anxiety in the future. But for the 30 minutes or whatever, when you're actually doing a meditation, you're taking a different approach. And that different approach is kind of like what you might think of as like exposure therapy, but it's just exposure to the emotion itself. So we're sitting very quietly, and instead of thinking or acting or using some kind of coping strategy, what we're doing is actually just turning towards the emotion or the sensation that represents that emotion in our experience, and just experiencing it, just actually investigating it, getting curious about it, looking into it closer, and letting it fully arise into our experience, not pushing it away in any way, but actually allowing it. And this is kind of, especially with like anxiety or fear, this is like the last thing that we would expect or that we would want to do. It's the last thing that we would expect would be helpful, is to like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What if I just let it wash over me? Because at first you're going to feel even more anxious. Like, if I actually allow this thing into my experience, then I have to really experience it, and that's terrifying. That makes me even more anxious, right? So it seems like the least the thing that we would want to do the least, the thing that seems, when we're in that anxious state, it seems like the thing that is least likely to help, or the least probable solution. But in fact, it is the most useful. So I'll tell you about an experience I had the other day while I was meditating. I think I might even have talked about this in a video where I talked about having an anxiety or some kind of anxiety attack while I was meditating. And I had set my intention at the beginning of the meditation that I wanted, whatever this insecurity, anxiety thing, I wanted it to go away. And so then I started meditating, and it like attacked me. It just like all angles, all levels at once was just like anxious energy. There was this humming in my ear. It was just like, it was petrifying. And it only started to go away after I stopped trying to apply a technique, after I stopped trying to make it stop or deal with it in any way. It only started to get better when I just kind of like the fuck it switch, which I was just like, okay, like it's not going away. Let's just turn towards. Let's just try and fully experience. Maybe there's a kernel of wisdom to be found inside of this very negative, kind of scary experience. And it turned out that there was. Like, actually, I turned towards the anxiety. And then all of a sudden, like, this kind of, first it got worse. The anxiety got worse. Like, this energy that was coming at me, or whatever it was getting stronger. And I was, like, kind of sweating and tense and stuff. But I just fully experienced it. Started to relax a little bit. My awareness kind of started to open back up a little bit. And it was almost like this voice in my head, or maybe just like a thought, kind of a realization came up, which was like, oh, when I'm busy being anxious, like I'm missing all of this, like, and by all of this I mean everything all the time. Like, the entire universe is like every point in space, every place in the universe is like exploding with energy and creative potential at every moment. And you're missing that if you're like kind of chained up or inhibited by this anxiety. So, okay, so this is all just like an example of turning towards and releasing into, instead of kind of clamping up and turning away. And this is really how the emotional purification process works. It's fundamental, is this, I don't even know if it's learning, but submitting yourself to an intense experience, could be in a seated meditation, and then like actually allowing yourself to experience that. And the reason that it works really well in meditation is because you more or less know that you're in a safe place. Like it's just me and the room and the cushion and like my own thoughts. So I'm in a, you know, a safe place. I'm in a safe structure. No one's going to interrupt me. It's not really going to, you know, nothing really bad is going to happen. And within that safe container, you're allowing a relatively scary and what our mind thinks is an unsafe psychological experience to happen. And learning to have tolerance with that, learning to experience it fully, and kind of learning to release and turn towards that is the real magic behind mindfulness. It's the real magic behind meditation. And you're not just going to get that by concentrating on your breathing, for example. So there are kind of specific techniques that can help you turn towards your emotional experience. But if you're just sitting there breathing and doing that for years, I mean, you probably are trying to escape, but you're still stuck, or you're just sitting there concentrating. As soon as you're done concentrating, all this emotional stuff like comes back up. So it's really actually crucial, if you're, you know, like on the path to enlightenment, to actually work with this emotional energy and bring it to some kind of equilibrium. I was gonna say resolution, but I don't think this process ever completes. I think it's just like a skill that you can always work on. It's like the game of golf. Like no one is perfect at golf. No one goes to the golf course and make in their score is 18. They don't get a hole in one, 18 holes in a row, and they're like, okay, I'm good at golf now. It's not that, you know. It's more like a skill that you can hone and develop over years, and you can quite enjoy the process, and you can also quite enjoy the result. But it's, you know, it's never quite perfect. My experience with the emotional purification is that it's something like that. It's something that you hone across time and develop across time, and you can always get better at it. You can always work on it more. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, as my friend Matthew says. Anyways, I'm going to stop the video now, and I will see you guys tomorrow for day 19. Take care.